and the 11th juz. We missed a lesson yesterday, so we're going to try to cover the 10th and the 11th juz. So the 10th and the 11th juz, it begins, there's two key surahs really that are mentioned in this, which is Surah Al-Anfal and then Surah At-Tawbah. These are the two surahs. Now, the theme again is interesting. The theme of both of these surahs again is like war, war and jihad. And like we mentioned last time, it's important for us to make that relevant to our life. Now, obviously, we're not talking. No one's saying to go to war, obviously, in our time. So, what is our war? Our battle is to be present with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. That's our battle. One is to be present with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, like through our salah. Yeah. One is to be present with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala through attending gatherings of dhikr like this, like going to lessons of knowledge. But also, it means to be present with Allah at all times and in all places. That's the greatest challenge that we have as human beings, is how can we stay present with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala? How can our hearts stay present with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala at all times? And this is like really the challenge for us. So like, again, one of the things, this is a common question that I was mentioning this also with Uncle as well. It's a common question is that a lot of people, obviously, we have busy lives. So the question is, fair enough, we need time for our families, we need time for work, we need time to do the shopping. Yeah, we need time to do all these things, isn't it? So it's like, how do we understand where Islam fits into that? This is the problem we have now. It's like, where does Islam fit in? I remember once we had one of our teachers from America, Sheikh Jamaluddin Haiso, mashallah, amazing teacher. He's an expert really in da'wah. That's his real field, mashallah. He came, subhanallah, he came to Blackburn, and he was doing just to give you an example of who this man is, a really very, very special man. He was doing like a radio show in Blackburn, and like a woman called in who was like, we were in a masjid, so I don't want to say, but she was like what we say, like a loose woman, let's just say. She was somebody who would do like things as well. And a lot of these, we have rahmah for everybody. These people, men and women, are in difficult situations, so we have rahmah upon them. And she called in and said, "This is what I do. Right? Basically, this is how I make my money." I think the adults amongst you understand what I'm saying. And she said, "Is there room in Islam for me?" What a question! Because is there room? I forgot the speaker.
It's all right. Yeah, you can do. Because that person was partying in my ear.
Oh, no problem. I'll put it in. Yeah, sure. So the question was, this woman, she calls in on the radio and she says, "Is there room in Islam for me?" And his response was beautiful. Is that, is there room? It's almost like saying Islam came down for people like you, to give you hope and to never ever despair. This is why Islam is here. Yeah, and she was so moved that she actually became Muslim. Yeah, she entered into Islam just through this dialogue with Sheikh Jamaluddin has. So this is, I give you an example. These are people, mashallah, they've dedicated their lives to da'wah, and they speak to everybody and anybody. Yeah, they engage with people and they speak with them. So he said, someone once asked me, said, "I'm too busy to do da'wah. I'm too busy." He said, "Listen," he goes, "every time you step foot out of your house, go with the intention that you want to benefit creation. Because you go into the service station to go and buy something, you benefiting people. Yeah, wherever you do, you're going to work, you're with your family, it's all that. Yeah, so it's about changing that intention around. That's really one of the key things that I want to emphasize in these lessons, is that we want to make the lesson practical for people, relevant to their lives. And like, sometimes you talk about things that it's just too much. Yeah, and you might be like, well, okay, how can I bring that to my life? I'd say two things. Number one, it means you need to change your environment. If you're saying it's too hard for me to do something, your environment's wrong. Yeah, Islam was created according to your environment. That's why Islam is coming. The first thing it's telling you to do is change your environment. I can remember, like, we have this retreats. A few of the brothers in Waqar, a few of the brothers have been. We have a retreat to the Trodden Path in Wales. Some of our teachers have set up. We go there for 10 days. And one of the secrets of that retreat is you're there for 10 days. You go out into this village. Straight away, you bring all of your prayers in Jama'ah. So someone might say, "Oh, I can't pray my prayers. It's too hard to pray my prayers in the masjid or with Jama'ah. It's just too hard." As soon as you go there, you're doing it without even thinking about it. So that's telling you, once you change your environment, things just change immediately. And then after that, other things are then built upon that. The other things are built. So that's number one, what we would say to people, is that if you find it difficult, you need to change your environment. Number two, we would say you need to change your intention. Reorient your life upon the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these are very, very important. So we have this. So then, if you look at these surah, we're looking at Al-Anfal, and then we're looking at Surah At-Tawbah. So Surah Al-Anfal focuses a lot on what they call the Battle of Badr. And we know about the Battle of Badr. The Battle of Badr was the first and the greatest out of all of the battles for the Muslims. It was a battle where truth and falsehood were separated. People saw what was true and they saw what was false. One of our teachers, Shaykh Abdul Hakim Murad, he says, there's more miracles in Badr than any other time in the Seerah. There's so many miracles and amazing things happen in that battle. The key point behind that battle is there are people who witness truth. There are people who see truth. And then there are people who see falsehood. They know that they're wrong, but they still continue to follow that. That was and that battle separated. They said those people used to make fun of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the mustahzi'un. Not those who disbelieved in him, those who used to mock the religion, all of them were killed on that day. All of them were killed without exception. It was a day when those who mock and those who try to belittle this beautiful religion were taken out. And that's an ongoing battle that's going to continue till the end of time. Yeah, that those who oppose Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَكَفَيْنَاكُمْ بِالْمُسْتَهْزِئُونَ. I will take care of them. He's saying this to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Those guys who mock, I'll take care of. Don't worry about them, I'll take care of them. And that's what we say now to the people of this age. Don't worry, those who are working for the sake of Islam, don't worry about the enemies. Allah will take care of them. Our job is just to establish this truth within our hearts and within the hearts of our families, our neighborhoods, our societies, and our communities. Yeah, we focus on that, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes care of these enemies and these other people that come. So that's one of the Badr. And then the other battle that's mentioned is the Battle of Tabuk. Now, the Battle of Tabuk was a very difficult battle. This was a battle where, first of all, it was an engagement with the Romans. And the Romans at the time were very experienced, very, very difficult people to fight against. Number one. Number two, it was at a time where it was extremely hot. It was very, very hot. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, again, imagine the scene. Imagine the scene. You go to the masjid for Asr prayer, like you hear, as an example. I don't know which prayer. Let's just say it's Asr. So you just come in now and you sit down and, start the Faqih, leads the prayer. And then after that, he says, right, we're going to battle. That's what it's like. It's just the Prophet ﷺ is the Imam. So imagine the Imam returns to his congregation, says, right, we're going right now. Yeah, let me just go and say goodbye to my son, my daughter. No, we have to go right now. Number one. Number two, we don't have any money. Yeah, we've got to go out. We need to raise an army of 20,000, 30,000. Who's going to give? And the people like Uthman, he stands up, he says, I'll give 1,000 camels and I'll supply 1,000 camels worth of goods. Food, everything. I'll give that. Sits down. Prophet says, who's going to give? Who's going to give? He stands up again, says Uthman, I'll give 1,000 camels, Ya Rasulullah, and I'll give everything that goes on those 1,000 camels, the food, the supplies, everything. Sits down. Who's going to give? Who's going to give? Who's going to give? So Uthman, he stands up again, third time. So I'll give 1,000 camels and I'll give everything on there. What does the Prophet says? Wajabat ala Uthman. Jannah has become an obligatory upon Uthman. He will, it's impossible for him to not enter Jannah. He's going to enter Jannah on that day. So this is what happens. And these are people, mashallah. You look at Sayyidina Uthman, who's a man of extreme wealth, what we would call like a tycoon. Very, very, like a multi-millionaire. Somebody who gave. So we see those kind of things happening within the masjid. Then we see somebody, like we see now an army that has to leave for 20 to 30,000. They have to walk over 1,000 miles in heat. They'd have to walk over 1,000 miles in heat. I mean, these are just unbelievable things for us to even imagine. And you talk about a town that's hot, for them it's hot. It's like 50 plus. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have ever been in the desert, but it's tough. We were in the desert, it was about 45 degrees. And we were just we used to walk, probably about a mile. That's all it was. You would walk we were in like a retreat type place. We would walk, then we'd go to a place, then we'd climb up a mountain. And that was tough. And mashallah, I'm not that old and I'm in reasonable shape. I'm not that unwell. It was hard. And here you're talking about men, it's like 60 plus. The Prophet ﷺ himself was around 60 at that time. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he's walking with ferocity and determination. This is a himmah that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places determination, resolve, drive within human beings. Yeah, so this is the nature of it. So that, again, this battle is discussed. And this battle is important because we see a separation between the hypocrites and the true believers. You see, there's many now, they make the excuses. And look at the beauty of the Prophet ﷺ, he accepts. He says, okay, that's fine. He accepts the excuse. Yeah, he doesn't say, well, what about this? The Prophet ﷺ, he didn't find fault in anybody. If someone gave an excuse, even though he knows, of course he knows, he has firasa. Yeah, he knows what's going on. He knows that they could go, they're hiding disbelief in their hearts. It doesn't matter. He accepts and he accepts. And he continues to accept. This is the generosity of the Prophet ﷺ. But amongst them, now we see this in Surah At-Tawbah, this particular is mentioned, there's 3 of them. Khulifu, they were left, they stayed behind. They stayed behind. And these 3, who are they? They are 3 who could have gone. Believers. They're not hypocrites, they're believers. They believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they believe in the Rasul. They could have gone and they didn't go. Why not? For whatever reason it might be. They said like the fruits were ripe at that time of the year. It was difficult. They could have like made arrangements, so they just didn't, for whatever reason it was. Yeah. And then it says about those 3 people that the earth around them became constricted. Yeah. Until they were like, they couldn't escape within their own selves. Yeah. This is anxiety, difficulty, restriction that they felt. And then it says, until they realized that there's no malja, there's no escape from Allah except to Allah. Yeah, there's no malja, there's no refuge, there's no safety from Allah except to Allah. Like they give some of our scholars give an example of like a mother and the child. Yeah, mother and the child. So the mother's turning the child off, and the mother slaps the child. Yeah, or something like that, or shouts at the child. What does the child do? He runs straight back to the mother for protection. The mother's the one who did it, and that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's one is one who punishes, but he is the only one. There's no one else. Where else are we going to go? So he punishes, and then we go back to him for protection. And that's what they realize. And when they realize this point, that there's no margin, there's no escape, there's no protection for Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turned to them and accepted their tawbah. Yeah, subhanAllah. So there's a message in there for us. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we go to him in each and every situation. And he's there. Yeah, he's there. And sometimes with that, like I can say to you, yeah, I can say to you all day long, but really sometimes you just have to go through life. Some people say, why am I getting trialed and tested? Why is life so difficult? This is the reason. So you can understand, because it's easy for me to say, but those people who have experienced difficulties within their life, ask them. Yeah, people who have been rock bottom and beyond. Yeah, you go through experiences where that's when you really understand the reality of that statement, that there's la malja illa ilayk, there's no refuge, there's no escape, there's nothing whatsoever other than I return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they realize this and they turn back. But look at these people. Again, the time of the Prophet was a difficult time. Yeah, we all want to be at the time of the Rasul. It was difficulty. Because what happens to these people? 3 of them, no one speaks to them for 50 days. 50 days, no one speaks to them. No one deals with them, any kind of like financial transaction, any type of transaction. 50 days like a boycott against these 3 people. And look at this with Tawbah. They spent 50 days and nights crying out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh, Ya Allah, forgive me. I mean, how would we might do like, if you do 50 seconds, we think I should be a wali now. I've done 50 seconds of asking Allah to forgive me on Laylatul Qadr or something. That's it now. These are 50 days before they get a response. Then after 50 days, that's when this revelation comes down in Surah At-Tawbah, and then, mashallah, the faraj comes for them. Yeah, and they really, really pleased. They learn an important lesson. Yeah, they learn a really, really important lesson. So these are just some of the aspects. So if you look more systematically through these 2 juz, so it begins. It talks about the Battle of Badr, and then it also mentions a few other key points. So it talks about the hypocrites, like we mentioned, and then it also talks about another battle, which is the Battle of Hunain. Hunain is actually specifically mentioned. The Battle of Hunain is specifically mentioned within this surah. It's the only battle that's mentioned in the Quran by name, except for Badr. Yeah, so it's significant. Now, what's the message of Hunain? If you look at Hunain, the message is simple. The message is Iman. That's the message. Because in Hunain, the Muslims have good numbers for the first time. There's about 12,000 of them, and there's 20,000 non-Muslims, 20,000 kuffar, which is nothing really. They're fighting armies of 100, 200,000 sometimes, and there's just 10,000 of them. I mean, they fought the Romans and Mut'ah. Yeah, so this is like, mashallah, it's easy, it's a walk in the park, you would think, but it doesn't work like that. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting you know that numbers don't matter. Equipment doesn't, none of those outer things matter. Yeah, what really matters is iman within the heart. So a lot of these 12,000, they actually flee the battle. They're like new Muslims just come in, they struggle and they don't have that authentication within their hearts. Yeah, so they struggle as a result of it, and they end up leaving. Yeah, they end up leaving, and then what happens? There's only 100 that remain behind. That's it, 100, and those are the close. These are the real deal, as you would say. The close ones around the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Siddiq and the Faruq, and these types of people. Yeah, these great giants. They stand firm, 100 of them, and they actually repel the enemy themselves. So this is just showing you haqa'iq, realities that we have to try to understand. I remember we had a conference there when I was in Tanim with Al Mustafa. They had like a 3-day like a da'wah conference, called like a multaqa. People come from all over the world. And they discuss different issues. So they had a 3-day conference about the media, like that the influence of the media on Muslim youth. What can we do to combat the influence of the media? What can we do to produce our own media? Really important questions, because this is where we're at. If we want to reach the masses, we're not going to reach it other than through the media. It's a beautiful conference. And there's 3-day, a lot of different discussions, people from all over the world there. You had like journalists there, the people that aren't really necessarily practicing Muslims there, like a good mixture of people, a lot of really good discussions. So at the end, they came to the conclusion of the conference, and you almost sense almost like a sense of despair. Yeah, which is very unusual. When a place like Dara Mustafa is supreme optimism. You're always like, yeah, we can conquer the world. You always have that feeling there. You're thinking, mashallah. So it was a bit of a strange feeling. It was almost the feeling was, what can we do? Like, look at Hollywood. They've got like millions, billions of pounds to spend, dollars. So how can we compete with that? It was that kind of feeling. That's what the vibe that you're getting from the questions that are being asked. So Habib Umar, he comes at the end and he spoke and he said, listen, he said the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam he was in a situation that was far worse than you guys. Because there's 1.8 billion Muslims. In his time, how many were there? Now, when he's fleeing Makkah al-Mukarramah, how many Muslims are there? 100 maybe? Because yet, he was thinking about conquering the world. Even at that time, he wants to conquer Persia. He's talking about conquering Persia, getting the bracelets of Kisra, like we mentioned. He's talking about conquering Rome. He's not down, he's not depressed. He's not looking down. He's thinking, no, I've got the whole world in my fingertips. So it's that kind of, it's time that supreme confidence. And we should have that. Like even, I'll give you an example. Look, even like non-Muslims, you look at the slave trade in the UK. Who ended the slave trade? This guy called William Wilberforce. Yeah, mashallah, historians like Bukhari will know this. William Wilberforce. Yeah, and who was he? He was an individual who had a handful of people around him. He didn't have many people. This is a non-Muslim now. He didn't have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on his side like we do. There's only a handful. Probably the same number as people as in maybe less actually than what are in this room. Less than what are in this room right now. And yet he ended the slave trade, which was what? Destroying the whole world at the time. Yeah, so it isn't about numbers. Yeah, it isn't about numbers. The point here is really it's about iman. And it's about having the absolute confidence with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of these battles are revealing that. All of these stories are revealing that. That's why it's really sad that the study of what they call the ghazawat have been abandoned. The study of the battles in the sea, they've been abandoned as a science. Subhanallah, we need revival. People now need to be revived because we need to study them from today's perspective. What can we learn today? Yeah, this is one of the purposes, the only reason why I mentioned these points so much. First of all, they come in, a large part of the Quran deals with this. That's not an accident. A large part of the seerah is about the battles. So we just say, what can we learn from them? And there's a lot that we can learn. Yeah, and from amongst the most important messages is iman. Yeah, from amongst the most, if not the most important message of all of these battles. Okay, so we learn about Hunayn. Then we learn about the surah then goes and it speaks about the hypocrites. And it talks about two key qualities of the hypocrites. The first one is that they make fun of the believers. So it's like, oh, I told you so. Oh, look, you've done that, now you're lost. I told you you shouldn't have done that. Yeah, they're constantly undermining. And we see this, unfortunately, we see this now in today's day and age. Yeah, that people were trying to say, this is really, and we're all guilty of it. It's that, what happens when someone does something, then it's like, oh, it's all critics say he's done that wrong, he's done that wrong. But what are you doing? You're not doing anything, but then you're going to point the finger. Yeah, number one. And number two, even more important for us, is the hypocrites at that time, they have like a victim mentality. SubhanAllah, they feel sorry for themselves. The whole world's against me. That's what we hear all the time now. or it's the Jews, it's the Freemasons, or whatever people want to come, these conspiracy theories. It's like, no, it's not, it's Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who is defeating and vanquishing you. He is the one, there's no one else. There is nothing else that exists other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why are you trying to find other excuses? It's Allah who's doing it. Why is Allah doing it? That's what you need to look at. And that's when you need to return back to the Quran and back to an understanding. There's nothing else out there. Now look at the Mongols. When the Mongols destroyed the Muslim world, who did the Muslims blame? They never blamed the Mongols, not once. They asked one of the Mongol leaders at the time, he was the son of Genghis Khan, he said, I am the wrath of Allah I'm the wrath of God that's come to destroy you. He said it to one of the Muslim scholars. He said, yeah, you're right. I agree. So what? He goes, yeah, he goes, you've got no power. This is being sent because of what we've done, our sins. Now the punishment's coming to us. It's nothing to do with you. Why is it's like a form of shirk, isn't it? Why are you going to associate power with anyone? There's no power, no strength except with Allah. Yeah, we have complete tawakkul and reliance upon Allah. We see Allah in everything. Yeah. Khayrihi wa sharrihi. All of the qadr, all of whatever is decreed is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's where power lies. That understanding is liberating. It's powerful. Because now you're like, okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge. We can access Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala whenever we want. So why are we worried? Why do we feel powerless? You should never feel powerless, because the only power that exists is Allah. The only power that exists. And we have access to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can speak with him and we can gain strength from him. So therefore, those who remain patient and remain strong, Allah will give them istikhlaf. Allah will give them power within the earth. Yeah, and he will replace their fear with security. Yeah, this is the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's not like us. He doesn't break promises. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's promise is absolutely true. And I mean, it's repeated. I mean, if you want to look for like empirical evidence, just read any book of history. Read any book of history and you'll see it happens again and again, and it'll continue to happen to the end of time. Yeah, I was reading recently about this Imam Shamil. Many of you might know from Dagestan, Imam Shamil, from that area of the world, Central Asia. Extraordinary strength. For 20 years, he resisted an army that was about like 200 times his size, the Russian army. Yeah, over 1 million Russian soldiers that were killed in that 20-year period of his resistance. I mean, how did he do it? Just in the mountains in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, this was Iman. If you look at him, his amazing life. He was brought up as a scholar. Like he memorized the Quran from a young age. He memorized many of the books of Shafi fiqh. He was a man of tasawwuf. He was a qadri ba tariqa. He had many different elements to his, and he learned archery. He learned, all the prophetic arts from a young age. He was very erudite. He was a great public speaker. Yeah, he had many of these great qualities. Yeah, and then look at what that led to. Yeah, they mentioned the same Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi. The same time, they actually met in Hajj. They met in the Hajj, yeah, which makes these non-Muslims worried, thinking these guys meet in Hajj and they conquer the world. I mean, Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, the same thing, extraordinary upbringing. Yeah, he's brought up as like a very high-level scholar. They say about his father was one of the great scholars of that time. They said his father, when he would go on Hajj, in secret. He didn't want people to know he's going on Hajj. What would happen is hundreds of thousands of people would start to follow him when they realized he was going, to the extent that when he'd get to the doors of the Arabian Peninsula, they thought an army had come. The Ottomans would be like, what's happened? They send an army out. And he'd be like, no, I've just come for Hajj. So who are all these guys? I don't know where they are. I just left my house to go on Hajj. They followed me. So they should look at the path. But then if you look at this man, I mean, it's important to understand, how does he raise his child? I mean, Abdul Qadir Jazairi, very interesting. When Abdul Qadir Jazairi gets to about 17, 18, for 1 year, he sends him to the Ukraine. Now, the Ukraine at the time was the worst place on the planet, the most decadent place. It was a place where you just had a lot of sin. Yeah, you had a lot of sin. So what does he do? He's testing him. Okay, I've trained you spiritually now. Let's see how you get on. And he's completely and utterly unmoved. He's not tempted by any of the alcohol or the whatever other foulness that's there. It doesn't affect him whatsoever. He comes back after a year. He said, how was it? Yes, yeah. It didn't bother me. Then he's like, okay, now you're ready for leadership. Then he puts him into politics and says, now you're ready to take on the fitan of the world. It's ajib. Yeah, so these types of individuals, all they had and all they ever needed was Iman. Yeah, their iman is what allowed them to conquer. So we see these are just some of the messages here. The hypocrites are the opposite. The hypocrites are people who have this sense of inferiority and they're scared of everything. Okay, to conclude now, I just want to mention one ayah within this within these two juz, inshallah. That's an ayah that's like a foundational ayah for us. It's an ayah that we should remember, try to memorize, and more importantly, try to understand and implement. Yeah, one of the things that the Quran is asking is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do we not reflect? Do we not think about the Quran? This is one of the things we have to do. We have to be repeating ayat of the Quran, reflecting upon them. The Sahaba, they take an ayah or even a part of an ayah, spend all night repeating it. You know, this is just the way that they were. So this ayah is talking about it mentions 8 things. It talks about 8 things that people love more than Allah. And that people love more than the Prophet Sallallahu that people love more than struggling in his way. So the ayah says, "Qul in kana aba'ukum." Yeah, if your parents, yeah, that's the first one. Wa abna'ukum, and your children. Wa ikhwanukum, and your brothers and sisters. Wa azwajukum, and your spouses. Yeah, these are the first 4 that's mentioned: your parents, your children, your brothers and sisters, and your spouses. Yeah, your husbands and wives. Wa ashiratukum, and then the 5th one, your tribe. Yeah, your tribe, my nation, my patriotism, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, wa amwalin iqtaraftumuha, and this wealth that you've been earning and that you're guarding over. Wa tijara takhshawna kasadaha, and your business that you fear is going to go down. Your career, yeah, I'm on a career path now that you're worried about. Am I going to get the promotion, this and the other? And then wa masakin tayyibatan tardawnaha, and the houses that you live in that you're pleased with. These are the 8 things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us. This is the dunya. These are things that we shouldn't care less about from a perspective, yeah, which we're going to explain. And then he says, if those 8 things are more important to you, ahabba ilaykum min Allahi wa rasulihi wa jihadin fi sabilihi fatarabbasu hatta yati Allahu bi amrih. Yeah, that if those 8 things are more important to you than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're more important, more beloved to you, more beloved than the Rasul and more beloved to you than struggling in his way, and struggling in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then just wait until death comes. Fatarabbasu, just wait until death comes. Wallahu la yahdi al-qawma al-fasiqin. Allah does not guide the people who are just wrongdoers, who are corrupt by nature. So these 8 things, we never put them ahead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We never put them ahead of the Rasul sallallahu, and we never put them ahead of jihad fi sabilihi. So what's jihad for us? Da'wah. Yeah, like it's interesting. If you look at the books of fiqh, you look at the Babul jihad, what comes under that is da'wah. Yeah, so that's our, like, for us, is to call people to Islam. That if we're going to put any of those things ahead of that, it's a problem. It's a problem. And this is the reality of the message of Islam that's been lost. It really has been lost. We've lost the idea of having a love for the Prophet ﷺ that's real. We can all claim, I mean, I can say I love the Prophet ﷺ. We can all say, anyone can say whatever they want. But the realities of that love they're found here. I mean, which of us are going to put our houses ahead of that? You know, like, it's ajib. I remember, like, and I wouldn't recommend for people to do this, but just as a point, that I remember our teacher, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf in America, there were people at the time, like, he needed money, he needed money to, like, set up a university and education institute. There were people, they were taking out mortgages. They would take our mortgage on their house and take that 100, 200,000 or whatever, and give it to Sheikh Hamza to build. SubhanAllah. I mean, that's something, isn't it? That's people this day and age who have understood that their houses don't matter compared to love of Allah and the Rasul. That's preference, isn't it? That's preference. They're putting that ahead of that. Yeah, and that's the point here, is that it's easy. We can talk about my career, but then what are we going to give up that promotion so we can spend more time sitting in the masjid learning knowledge? Yeah, maybe like now attending this class is hard because I could be going ahead and getting it. No. Yeah, this is what it comes down to. Otherwise, we can all say, yeah, look, like your parents, for example. Why do we love our parents? For the sake of Allah. Why do we love our children? For the sake of Allah. They mentioned the beautiful example of the Siddiq, Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. They said that he was sat with his son who later became Muslim. He said he was sat with his son, and his son says to him, he says that we were fighting together on the Battle of Badr. Me and you were together on the Battle of Badr, but we were on the same side, Father. You were on one side, I was on the other side. He says, yeah, nah, that's true, yeah. And he goes, on that day, because there were many times when you came under the shade of my sword. Yeah, you came under the shade of my sword. And he goes, I could have killed you, but I didn't because you're my father. Yeah, so this is how can I do this to my father? I can do this to my own father. So he said, listen, son, because if you had come under the shade of my sword even once, I would have killed you immediately. Because without shade, because this isn't about my son or my father. This is about the Rasul. There's things that go beyond that, transcend. And that's the reason I'm saying that's a true relationship. When you love your family for the sake of the Rasul, then you'll see what love is. Because then you'll really will put them first. And you look at the Ramadan's a good example. How many of us are helping out in the house in the Ramadan? Yeah, how many? Now, fair enough, you can say, well, I'm here now and having a lesson. Okay, then you've got an excuse. But many of us, we just sat there, we're not helping out in the house. The Prophet, he was in the service of his family. Yeah, he was in the service of his family. And look at the way he was with his children, his grandchildren. Look at the way he was with his wives. So this is jihad. Now, this is what we're talking about jihad. We're talking about da'wah. This is da'wah, bringing that example into our lives. Yeah. So all of these types of points, if we prefer our laziness over that, it's a problem. Because the only reason we're not doing it is because we just, oh, I'm tired or I don't want to do it. Yeah. So all of these things, this preference of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this preference of the Rasul and this preference of jihad, this is the essence of Islam. Yeah. That we should prefer to go out and talk to Islam with our next door neighbor over anything else. It doesn't matter. Yeah, and you know what's amazing? We saw this exemplified within our teachers, that there's people alive today who they would prefer that their own children go hungry. They would prefer that their own children have nothing within the world just to be able to bring someone into Islam, or just to be able to bring someone onto the right path. They don't care, honestly, they don't care, because they've understood that the one who serves humanity is you're actually serving the Prophet. What would it mean to be able to wash the feet of the Rasul? What would that mean? What would it mean to be able to carry his miswak or his sandals? That Abdullah ibn Mas'ud used to walk around with a strut because of his happiness, because he used to have the sandals under here like this. Sandals of the Rasul, so just took under here like this, and he'd have his miswak. That I'm the man. He is the man, mashallah. Anybody who's carrying those things is the man. Yeah, but we can do that as well. Don't think that we can't carry. We can carry his sandals. We can carry his miswak through saving creation. We can attain these types of ranks. So again, it's the how sincere are you? What's your level of sidq in terms of your love for the Rasul? If it's a true love, then prove it. Yeah, and mashallah, there's many that are doing it. We have to just join that. Because like I said previously, this is Allah's work. It's going to happen whether we like it. The question is, do we want to be those people at the Sabiqun al-Awwalun? Yeah, do we want to be those who stand with the Prophet on that day? Do you want to be those who are in his constant companionship? Or are we going to be distant? We here and the Rasul's in the other room, or he's in a mile, 2, 3, 4 miles of Rasulullah. Or do you want to be right next to him? We can be right next to him. I'll give you a simple example to finish. Every single one of us in this room can be like this with the Rasul. Every single one of us. How? Adopt an orphan. You know what you need to adopt an orphan? You need a spare room in your house. That's all you need. Adopted. How many born Muslim children are in care? And they're being brought up in houses of kufr. Where we've seen them. Many of them, I went to a conference once, the majority of people, and apologies even to mention this in the masjid, but sometimes the truth's bitter, the majority of the people in that looking for children to adopt were homosexuals. Now, we know a case of a young girl, Somalian girl, who was taken out from a household, and she was now placed into a household that doesn't have a mother and a father. It's got 2 mothers. Yeah, this is the reality. So there you go. If you want to be like Prophet, this is the Sahih al-Bukhari. No one's got any problems with authenticity of that hadith. It's Bukhari, Muslim, yeah. And what's the Prophet he's doing this. Yeah, he's doing this. These are all just, so this is just, and that's one of many things. The point is that we strive, and really it should be a constant striving. Yeah, that we shouldn't why are we going to set up a second best when you have an opportunity to be with the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Give it all up for that. There's nothing. What else is that we're living for? What are you going to really get? What are you going to get here that's worth giving up that? I mean, if there is something, I'd be interested. It's not answers on a postcard, isn't it? Let me know. Let me know what you think you're getting now in this world that's going to be better than having the companionship of the Prophet in this world and the next. If you can tell me something that's better than khalas, but there isn't. And you'll never ever find, the Sahaba didn't find it. They never find any pleasure sweeter than being with Rasulullah. And guaranteed none of us will ever find it. Inshallah. So it's upon us, inshallah, we ask Allah for tawfiq to become people of sidq and sincerity within this path, and to become people that strive to fulfill that way. Inshallah. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala sayyidina wa habibina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. If there's any questions, inshallah, we can take questions, inshallah. If anyone wants to ask via Zoom, or anyone here wants to ask, inshallah. جزاكم الله خير. صلى الله عليه وسلم.